So now I would like to introduce our keynote speaker, who I'm very excited about. So if you've been in Oklahoma for any length of time and you've been affiliated with aviation, you've probably either met or heard of our guest speaker today, and you probably know this man. He is a huge advocate for the aerospace industry, and he has done so much. He is a vital partner to the FAA and has been for a long time, helping to improve the state's airport planning process and serving as an exemplary role model for other states across the country. So let me tell you a little bit about his credentials and some of the amazing things. I don't have enough time, honestly, to go through his whole bio, but so these are some of his accomplishments that are really significant. In 2009, he was the recipient of the General Thomas P. Stafford Award and recognized for his outstanding contributions to Oklahoma's aerospace industry. This is a huge achievement. This award is very prestigious. He's been an attorney, a veteran of state government. He serves on several boards. In 2010, he served as the chair of the National Association of State Aviation Officials, NASAO, and has been the only Oklahoman to ever hold that office in NASAO's 80-year history. It's huge. He's now the co-chair of NASAO's Legislative Committee and a member of the U.S. Contract Tower Association Policy Board. Also in 2010, he earned the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association most prestigious award, the Hartranft Award, recognized for his achievements in public policy that have helped advance aviation. He is the only non-elected official to ever receive this award. He's championed legislation to promote aerospace industry, such as the engineering tax credits for aerospace. Many of you have benefited from that, I know. And the protection of public airports, such as the Aircraft, Pilot, and Passenger Protection Act. Under his leadership, $60 million of the $71 million that the Aeronautics Commission has received since they became wholly separate agency, but all the way back to 2002, so $60 million of it has been invested directly in Oklahoma's airport infrastructure. So very impressive. And so you guys can imagine he has an amazingly busy schedule, and we are so honored and fortunate to have him here today as a guest speaker. So we appreciate that he's been, for the past 15 years, the director of the Oklahoma Aeronautics Commission. And as I mentioned, amazing credentials and someone that I consider a personal friend. So I would like to have you join me in a warm Oklahoma welcome for our very own Victor Bird.
I'll keep that a little closer, otherwise y'all will think I'm a little bit like Marco Rubio. I'll come out from my bottle and you'll think, what happened to him? It's the Wizard of Oz. He disappeared. Michelle mentioned to you that I am a lawyer. I'm a recovering lawyer. So I want you all, but for lawyers, that's a 24-step process, not 12, and I'm on about step 17. I try to, in my jargon, not get too lawyerly. I may times point out to you, see, I said a word there that I wouldn't have said 16 years ago, but and I will try to bottle this, so to speak, because my mother always said that I had a mouth somewhat like a torn pocket, that I open it up and literally everything falls out. I've gotten some discretion over the years. I really struggled with this speech. I'll be honest with you. Michelle and I had visited, and I've done a lot of speeches over my career as a lawyer and then as director of the Aeronautics Commission. And it just didn't seem like any of them that I'd done in my 15 years as director really fit. I wanted to honor those that are being given awards today for making a difference. When you think about what Director Coppedge said regarding a Pathfinder, you're talking about someone who is a trailblazer, a person, a team, or an organization that through innovation or invention solves problems. At their core, they're a problem solver and makes what follows possible that actually wasn't before. And so there's one. See, previously I would have said heretofore, but, you know, you got to go to law school 3 years to understand that. And some, it was longer. I was not one of those. So let's just for a moment talk about innovation. So if there wasn't innovation, does anybody remember this? All you millennials won't. But if it wasn't for innovation, although I think this fellow found a hammer or something that's kind of like a hammer, well, we might still be like this. However, with just a little ingenuity, look, there's a conscience of fashion. There's domestication of animals. I don't know how useful he is, but probably, after all, he went into space later. There is, obviously, there's some good marital bliss. There's been a product. And believe it or not, there's a transportation system. I mean, these guys, they are pathfinders. And I'm sure the woman's probably leading the way. As I thought about this, I couldn't help but Google, though. You know, Google. That's the innovations and inventions that have had a profound impact upon mankind throughout its history. Here is just a sampling. When you look at those, we take all those for granted today. Probably even our smartphone, and most of the time we're probably cursing that. But all those things. And when you think about the smartphone, I always think about this. I think that, you know, there's that doomsday organization that keeps track of when we were the closest to nuclear Armageddon. Well, that was during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Think about it. No smartphone. President Kennedy managed to avoid nuclear Armageddon through that terrible crisis, and he didn't have a smartphone. Thank God. You know, he and Khrushchev probably would have gotten, you know, a little bit too emotional about the deal. So I wonder about smartphones and president. No, I'm not going to go there. Okay. All right. So I could have picked several of these to talk about, and I think it would have been interesting, maybe just to me, but still interesting. But that just didn't seem appropriate. It just didn't hit the mark, I thought, with the honorees or this audience. After all, you represent the central nervous system of the Federal Aviation Administration. You are a critical part of one of mankind's most important inventions, the airplane and the glorious story of aviation. April 15th, what comes to mind to me first, well, actually, I missed one there, so I want to put this up. How important is the airplane? I could go on about that for probably 10 or 15 minutes, but there's a guy that I know all of you will know, and probably you've had your share of, you know, condemning him, but this is what he had to say about the airplane. It was indeed the first internet or World Wide Web. It literally, physically shrank the world. We take it for granted now. We can go out to OKC Will Rogers, probably pay more than you wanted, maybe not, but you can get to the other side of the world in less than 15 hours. It took Wiley Post 7 days and 19 hours to get around the world in 1933. I'm sure everyone here has your list of the most significant achievements in aviation. I would like to share with you just a few of the achievements that I believe are the most significant, not only because of their impact, but because each one of them is the story of a pathfinder or pathfinders that made a difference, just like the ones that we are honoring here today. Okay, I'm actually a little prejudiced against these guys. You probably recognize who they are. Why in the heck did they go to North Carolina? If they'd have come here, they'd have gotten off 3 years earlier. We have more wind in western Oklahoma. Just ask Wind Energy. Oh, that's another speech. Okay, I'm not going to go there. All right. April 15th, 1953. What happened on that date? Kevin, you're disqualified. Don't answer that. Now, for those of you who are concerned about the IRS, and I know you are, fellow federal agency, it was the day our parents, and in some cases here, our grandparents, were settling up with Uncle Sam. This date is the last time the United States of America lost a ground soldier from an enemy air attack. When you think of all the conflicts, the wars we've been in since then, it just seems this is unbelievable. Too incredible, not just too good, too incredible to be true. But it is true. How is this possible? 3 words: absolute air superiority. The force is with us when it comes to air power. You're going to see now just some of the miraculous aircraft really that have been utilized by our military forces, primarily the Air Force, but certainly the Navy as well, since World War II. This extraordinary achievement is due to the legions of outstanding pilots who have flown and fly the superior aircraft produced and supported by the finest engineers, scientists, air traffic controllers, mechanics, and technicians in the world. Yes, we are just that incredible. All right, next, well, okay, yeah. My prejudice continues with respect to the Wright brothers. I actually think Wilbur may have been running as fast as the plane. But next date I want to talk to you about, July 25th, 1909. Can anybody, I mean, if anybody in the audience can guess what's significant about that date, maybe I shouldn't promise. I was going to say Michelle will give you a day off, but maybe I shouldn't say that. Somebody may be an aviation historian enthusiast like me, but, you know, I think I probably got you on that. You know what happened on this date? That's when a fella named Louis Blériot. Now, if you look that up, there are a million pronunciations of Louis Blériot, poor fella. Louis Blériot, you know, he was a Frenchman. There's a lot, but I'll go with Louis Blériot. He became the first man to fly an airplane across the English Channel. He took off in a sleek monoplane, not a biplane like the Wright brothers and many others at the time. His Blériot 11, powered by a 28 horsepower engine with a tractor propeller. And from Calais, France, he went to Dover, England in 32 minutes and landed safely there. That's quite an accomplishment in itself at the time. It certainly exceeded the Wright brothers' 12 horsepower engine and Wright Flyer, whose first flight was 12 seconds and 120 feet. But here's the real significance of Blériot's accomplishment, and it was extremely significant and had a direct bearing on this country. It shocked the preeminent world powers at the time, Great Britain, France, and Germany. England, which at that time had a navy like no other, absolute master of the world sea lane at that time, the Atlantic Ocean, was really shocked. All of a sudden, someone else could get to England by another means of transportation, not a ship, but an airplane. Frankly, just to hope I can say this, it scared the hell out of them and resulted in these countries investing tons of money into aeronautics and the development of better airplanes. This would be akin to, if some in the audience are old enough, I was pretty young, I was young then, when the Soviet Union launched Sputnik. Scared us to death. We thought they were going to strike us from outer space. That started all the drills in schools. I remember, you know, get under your desk. You'll be safe from the Red Scare then. Well, yeah, sure, okay. Yeah, safe in another life form. But it was very similar to that, and to some extent it's kind of similar today. We're a little bit apprehensive about a fellow named Kim Jong-un. He needs a new hairstyle and some new clothes, but we're more concerned about his missile test. Those countries, because they bought a lot of planes from old Louis Blériot. He went into the manufacturing business. Unfortunately, the United States was not similarly shocked into such aeronautical investment. While the Wrights had pioneered powered flight in 1903, we had fallen significantly behind these powers regarding aeronautical development by 1915. Remember, the United States was not only were we reluctant to get into World War II, we were very reluctant to get into World War I. In fact, I think a guy named Woodrow Wilson ran on his last term, "I'm not going to get us into war." Of course, that changed. When we did get into the war, our pilots were flying British and French aircraft for the Allies, not for the airlines, not the Allies, not airlines, not American aircraft. It took us being somewhat shamed by this to force us to realize that we were behind. Thankfully, that led to the formation of the National Advisory Committee on Aeronautics, NACA, also known as NACA, and you know that better now as NASA, which it changed to in 1958, and it seems like something else happened in 1958. Oh, yeah. You guys were brought into being by a guy named Senator Mike Monroney, I guess your namesake. NACA's charter was simple, very simple. I boiled it down. But to me, to make the United States of America #1 in aeronautical technology. So over its 43-year history, how did NACA do? Let's look at NACA's report card, if you will. And I'm going to talk about this because NACA has, and then NASA has been doing this forever. Drag cleanup. First thing NACA did significant in this regard was the engine cowling for the air-cooled radial engine that went around the engine. It reduced drag and increased speed by 15 to 20 miles per hour. Something else you're going to see, and I'm going to talk about it several times as I go through this quickly, is NACA receiving the Collier Trophy. They received the Collier Trophy in that year, 1929 or 1930. It kind of gets a little bit, and that's the award still given today, annually given to those who have the greatest achievement in America with respect to improving performance, efficiency, and safety of air or space vehicles. Second thing, NACA research led to engines being mounted on the leading edge of the wing rather than under the wing or in front of the nose. Pretty common today, but not back then. Third thing, there was low drag wing research and work that led to the laminar flow airfoil. This was an aerodynamicist dream that this could be, that this could actually come into existence. Due to how superior it was, the British insisted on it when they bought an improved P-51 Mustang from North American Aviation, and that's the way it came. This was thereafter incorporated into many civilian and military aircraft, including our first jets. Fourth thing NACA did was development of a turbo supercharger that allowed B-17s to maintain speed at high altitudes. It was thereafter used in most power plants in U.S. aircraft. And during World War II, our military aircraft had a significant power advantage above 15,000 feet that was never fully countered by the Axis powers. I like to call this one, it makes me feel like James Bond, Hold the Ice. NACA perfected a heat de-icing system that piped hot engine exhaust air along the leading edge of the wing, saving countless lives of airmen. For this, they received the 1946 Collier Trophy. Then, you know, those glorious fighters of the 50s, all of them had the swept-back wings. Who formulated that concept? 1945, and here's what's kind of incredible about that. when I think most of the German scientists and engineers and so forth, like Werner von Braun, they kind of ran to meet us when World War II was ending. They didn't want to go the other way to the east. Everything that NACA developed about the swept wing was confirmed by studies and research discovered that the German scientists and engineers had. The F-86, probably the most iconic version of this, used from 1947 forward and in the Korean War. Next of significance, pretty darn significant, the NACA's oversight and their data and research led to a guy named Chuck Yeager, boy, looks a lot different there, being able to break the sound barrier in the Bell X-1 in 1947. Their contribution was so significant that most of the time you'll read that Mr. Yeager, great pilot, love him, that he got the 1947 Collier Trophy. He shared that with NACA. The development of some and some don't. I quiz some of my younger staff because they're smarter than me. In 1951, 52, 53, a fellow named Richard Whitcomb developed what was called the Whitcomb Area Rule. And that resulted in the wasting, the nice wasting of a fuselage right where the wings connected to reduce, that allowed us to reduce drag and increase speed. Again, you always see this in NACA trying to do that, aerodynamics. That was incorporated into every American supersonic aircraft. For this, NACA again received the 1954 Collier Trophy. Just a little footnote here. Whitcomb is the fellow who invented and developed application of winglets to increase lift-to-drag ratio. And finally, the best for last, NACA early on, very soon after it was founded, recommended the establishment of the Bureau of Aeronautics, otherwise known as the Aeronautics Branch in the Commerce Department, and that, of course, was the predecessor, maybe two removed, to FAA. So let me just, some of you will ask, well, gee, how about Lindbergh? How about Wiley Post? I just don't think it put into motion what happened. Of course, we can debate this forever, and that's what you'll read a lot if you do a lot of research on this. But I think Blériot's flight, pretty darn significant. So thank you, Lewis. We appreciate you. All right. You've all been waiting for this, and now it's time. I'm not going to avoid it any longer. The moment, here's the Wright Flyer, the first flight featuring the Wright Flyer on December 17, 1903. They chose a place called Kill Devil's Hills, just close to Kitty Hawk, to do their flight testing and so forth. And on this date, Orville, they had tried on December 14th, and that was a crash. That was Wilbur's turn. But on this date, with assistance, of course, from his brother Wilbur, Orville piloted the first flight of a powered, heavier-than-air, controlled aircraft. There had been balloons. I wouldn't get one of those. Dirigibles, and those kind of went out of common use. And gliders, I don't know what the heck that is, really. I'm not even sure Senator Inhofe would get in. Certainly, I don't think he'd get on that. But the Wright brothers were the first to successfully combine a suitable airframe and an internal combustion engine to create a controllable airplane that actually flew. Some might view the first flight and the others on that day as a series of, frankly, long hops. The first flight went, and I said this a moment ago, 120 feet and lasted 12 seconds. That was an airline. They wouldn't even have time to pull someone off the aircraft. The fourth and last flight of the day, though, by Wilbur, that went 859 feet and lasted 59 seconds. That was quite a feat. So you think about this, and I recommend to all of you David McCullough's book on the Wright brothers. I've only read parts of it because I couldn't understand some of it, but it's really pretty fantastic, and I'll get back to this. I believe the Wright brothers are underappreciated. How did these two bike shop owners do this when others, like Samuel Langley, heard of a place called Langley, Virginia? You know, he was pretty famous in his own right. Octave Chanute and Otto Lilienthal. In fact, Lilienthal died in 1896 on one of his gliders. All those fellows had failed. Well, like any good FAA or NASA engineer, they did their research of the aeronautical knowledge of that time, but very importantly, they didn't just accept this knowledge and data. They questioned it. In fact, Lilienthal's data was incorrect, and that led to them developing one of the first wind tunnels that they could acquire their own data with. They did their own testing on lift and drag in one of the first wind tunnels, as I said, built in America. And there was one other major difference in the Wright brothers. The Wrights focused upon developing a reliable method of pilot control as the key to solving the flying problem. This was different from the other precursors like Langley, who put their emphasis on powerful engines and somehow expected that the control would just follow. Anybody remember, can you remember kind of, if you're into, you know, Langley did a famous experiment in the Potomac River, and God, I wish that was like I wish most bad ideas would have this same fate up in Washington, but the plane kind of went off and then right down in the Potomac. They just couldn't get it. But this led to their invention of three-axis control, of pitch, roll, and yaw of an airplane that enabled the pilot to steer the airplane effectively and maintain its equilibrium. They used wing warping, a technique they developed to control roll, a forward elevator to control pitch, and a rear rudder to control yaw. It was their refusal, Littlefoot, to share their research and data on wing warping with a guy named Glenn Curtis that led him. Some would contend he actually discovered and developed it. One such person would be a guy named General Tom Stafford. But that led him to further refine the aileron. They finally found a heck of a mechanic, maybe the first A&P in their own shop, a guy named Charlie Taylor, to build their propulsion system, their engine. He built the very first aircraft engine from scratch, not reverse engineering, scratch. An aluminum engine block, first of its kind at that time on an internal combustion engine, 4-cylinder, 12 horsepower engine. Probably very good gas mileage, but yeah, 4-cylinder, 12 horsepower. They weren't into, gotta be powerful. It was control of the aircraft. No question, it was a remarkable achievement. Everything that followed insofar as aeronautical development. Some people say you shouldn't count, it was gonna happen. Yeah, but everyone you talk to, really I think of as scholars, like General Stafford, someone had to do it. And the first ones that did it were the Wright brothers. All the aeronautical development that flowed from that very first flight. In 2 decades, there would be commercial flights of passengers. In 30 years, Wiley Post would solo around the world. 44 years from their flight, Chuck Yeager would break the speed of sound. And 58 years later, a human would go into outer space. 66 years later, 66 years, man would travel 239,000 miles and land on the moon. Was the Wright brothers' reasoned approach to solving the problem of flight underappreciated? Probably. A big probably. They practiced aeronautical engineering and aerodynamic science in their bike shop instead of a university. The principles of aerodynamics had been established, but the Wrights successfully conquered the engineering that was necessary and turned the science into an airplane of practical use. This, I think, is pretty remarkable. Don't anyone please say that, oh, that's wrong. Don't say that. Just tell me afterwards. In 2003, the centennial of flight celebration, 100 years, there was a challenge. Everybody replicate, make, manufacture your own Wright Flyer, and whoever gets it to fly wins. There were a number of takers, maybe, I don't know, 10, 20, number of takers. Not a one of them was able to fly. Not a one. The Wright brothers had the right stuff. Several times in my remarks, I've mentioned Wiley Post. He's one of our own. He's one of our heroes. He's part of our very proud aviation heritage in Oklahoma. In addition to becoming the first solo pilot around the world, he invented the first pressurized suit, really the first space suit, which later allowed General Stafford to go, on Apollo 10 to 239,000 miles and then set the world speed record on his way back. I think 24,791 miles per hour. Man, that's moving. No highway patrolman could catch him. But he did this. He created this because cabins weren't pressurized. They were being researched by NACA. They had a heck of a unit and division on that. But he needed a suit, a pressurization suit, so that he could go into very high altitudes for the purpose of, and he did it, discovering the jet stream. Several of the first airlines were founded here in Oklahoma, among them Braniff by two brothers, Tom and Paul. That started as a commuter airline between Tulsa and Oklahoma City and became part of, in the late 1920s, early 30s, it became part of a fledgling airline known as American Airways. Today in Oklahoma, we're one of the 7 centers in the world for the maintenance, repair, and overhaul of aircraft. Right here in this state, we have the world's largest military aircraft repair facility, Tinker Air Force Base, and the world's largest commercial aircraft repair facility, the American Airlines Maintenance Base in Tulsa. Oklahoma has more astronauts per capita than any other state, among them Gordon Cooper in the original Mercury 7 astronauts, Tom Stafford in the second group, and Shannon Lucid. Aviation and aerospace, please, if you've got nothing else, but I think you have. I used to watch jurors bob and nod, so I've seen some bobbing and nodding. A few people have fallen asleep. That's okay. This will be available later. I'll hand it out. Aviation and aerospace provide over 200,000 direct and indirect jobs in our state. It has a over $44 billion annual economic impact and a payroll of right at $11.5 billion. Now, let me tell you, folks, that makes us, without question, we're a firm number 2. And sometimes when our friends, and aren't we lucky, it's not like it was in the 1980s when people were leaving the state and there were T-shirts that said, well, the last one leaving, please turn out the lights, when we had another bad oil bust. We are much more diversified than we were then, and aviation and aerospace is a big part of that. The Monoroney Aeronautics Center, you come in tied in second place. Tinker's the largest, about 27,000 jobs. Monoroney and American, 5,000 to 6,000. Second place always when it comes to jobs in aviation and aerospace. Consistently, you are in the top 10 when you consider all sectors and total employment in our state. Since, I know this can be, if there's anybody from Houston, forgive me. Since taking or getting you from Houston in 1946, we were very happy to oblige Houston. We've been proud of the critical role that you play in the world's most complex aviation system. I didn't list a particular achievement of the FAA in my repertoire of that. But I didn't list the space program either, and some of you are probably questioning, God, this guy really doesn't get it. I see that as a different track, I do. No question that our achievement of landing a man on the moon and returning him to the Earth within the decade of the 60s, thus meeting President Kennedy's challenge, was the greatest peacetime endeavor in the history of mankind. There is, however, an achievement by the FAA that is one of the greatest accomplishments in the history of American aviation. The FAA is a little bit like Robert Goddard. Anybody remember Robert Goddard? Okay, well, yeah, see that? He's the father of modern rocketry. He was ridiculed often, particularly by the press, because of his, and you know, criticized by others, because of his theories, his research, but make no mistake about it. Von Braun was brilliant, and I'm glad we captured him, but without Goddard, no V2, exploration of space, and landing on the moon. We take for granted, the American people take for granted, that the FAA will be there day in, day out, making sure that we have the safest air transportation system in the world, and that flying will be routine. It's like a walk in the park. That's the way September 11, 2001 began. Routine insofar as our nation's air traffic system was concerned. The weather had improved from summer thunderstorms that caused delays and air traffic controllers' headaches, and passengers had declined due to school being back in. And it was a Tuesday, notoriously one of the least busy travel days. Good day to buy your tickets because they seem to be cheaper. That is a whole nother speech, airline pricing. But one of the least busy travel days. Air Force One, down in Florida, President was visiting some schools, wasn't going to cause any issues till later that afternoon. Just after 9 a.m., it became clear that this wasn't going to be a routine day. Then air traffic controllers calmly instructed all commercial airline pilots to contact their companies. Pilots then learned that 4 commercial airliners had been hijacked and used for terrorist attacks. By 9:25, the FAA initiated an unprecedented national ground stop. Here's an example of that. This order, never implemented in the history of aviation in the United States, never implemented since Orville flew the first plane in 1903, applied to every single aircraft, and they all got down, every single one of them. You carried out this order in a manner that epitomizes your mission, to provide the safest, most efficient aerospace system in the world, and you protected us that day. It makes you question, doesn't it? Like the Wright brothers questioned the authorities of their day. Why would you pursue a different approach when you already have the safest and most efficient air transportation system in the world? Thank you all, and especially the honorees, for making a difference in saving lives in what you do every routine day.
Thank you so much. I would like to do a quick presentation to you. He doesn't know anything about this, but as I mentioned, Vic has been just such an amazing partner to us. And I didn't tell you guys, but the ACE camp that's going on right now, he's helped supported that for years and provided funding for the ACE camp and let us be successful there. And as you can see, he has amazing passion and just enthusiasm for aviation. So we are honored and blessed that you're here. And I wanted to present to you a small token of our appreciation, which is a plaque showing a lot of things across the Aeronautical Center that you make possible. So thank you so much.
I love it. Several places I can hide during the legislative session.